Have you heard about New York's massive inflation relief program that's putting real money back into the pockets of millions of residents? We're talking about checks ranging from $150 all the way up to $400. But here's the thing that nobody else is telling you: not everyone is going to qualify for this money, and the requirements might shock you. Are you one of the lucky New Yorkers who will see this cash hit your bank account? Or are you going to be left out in the cold? What if I told you that your 2023 tax return is the key to unlocking this money? And if you didn't file one, you might be completely out of luck? Stay with me because I'm about to break down exactly who gets what, when these payments are coming, and most importantly, what you need to do right now to make sure you don't miss out on money that could be rightfully yours. If you're finding this information valuable and you want to stay updated on all the latest financial relief programs and benefits that could put money in your pocket, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now and ring the notification bell so you never miss an update that could change your financial situation. Let's dive deep into what's really happening with New York's inflation relief program, because the devil is truly in the details. Governor Hochul announced this program as a response to the crushing inflation that's been hammering New York families for years. And honestly, it's about time someone acknowledged that people are struggling to keep up with rising costs. But here's where things get interesting and frankly a little frustrating. The state is funding these payments from excess sales tax revenue, which means they've essentially been collecting too much money from New Yorkers all along, and now they're giving a tiny fraction of it back and calling it relief. The payment structure is based on your income and filing status, and this is where you need to pay very close attention because getting this wrong could cost you hundreds of dollars. If you're married and filed a joint tax return with a combined income of up to $150,000, you're looking at the maximum payment of $400. Now, if your household income as a married couple falls between $150,000 and $300,000, you'll receive $300, which is still a decent chunk of change but not the full amount. For single filers, the numbers are different but follow the same pattern. If you earned up to $75,000 in 2023, you're eligible for $200, and if your income was between $75,000 and $150,000, you'll receive $150. But here's the critical part that's going to determine whether you see a penny of this money. Everything is based on your 2023 New York State tax return. Did you file a New York State tax return for 2023? If the answer is no, then unfortunately, you're probably not going to receive any of these payments, regardless of whether you actually qualify based on your income. This is the same frustrating pattern we've seen with previous relief programs where the government uses tax returns as the primary way to identify and reach eligible recipients, completely ignoring the fact that many low-income individuals, seniors on fixed incomes, and people with disabilities often don't file tax returns because their income is too low to require filing. Think about this for a moment. Some of the people who need this inflation relief the most are the ones who are least likely to have filed a tax return. We're talking about seniors living solely on Social Security, disabled individuals receiving SSI, and people working part-time jobs with very low wages. These are exactly the people getting hit hardest by inflation when they go to buy groceries or pay their utility bills. Yet they're the ones most likely to be excluded from this program simply because they didn't file a piece of paper that they weren't legally required to file. The timing of these payments is another crucial detail you need to understand. The state has indicated that these relief checks will be distributed sometime in late summer or early fall of 2024, but they haven't given a specific date yet. This means you could be waiting several more months before you actually see this money, assuming you qualify and assuming the state doesn't run into any administrative delays or technical problems with processing millions of payments. Now, here's where things get really interesting and where you might still have some options if you haven't filed a 2023 New York State tax return yet. While I can't give you tax advice and you should definitely consult with a qualified tax professional about your specific situation, it's worth understanding that in many cases, people who aren't required to file a tax return because their income is below the filing threshold could still choose to file a return, especially if doing so would make them eligible for benefits like these relief payments. If your income was low enough that you weren't required to file, a tax return would likely show little to no tax owed due to standard deductions, and it might actually result in a refund if you had any taxes withheld from wages or paid any estimated taxes. The question becomes whether it's worth the time and potential cost of preparing and filing a return to become eligible for these relief payments. For someone who could receive $200 as a single filer, it might make financial sense to file even if it costs $50 or $100 to have a return prepared, especially if there's no tax owed. But here's the million-dollar question that nobody seems to be addressing clearly: will the state accept late-filed 2023 returns for the purpose of determining eligibility for these relief payments? This is something that varies from program to program and state to state. And unfortunately, New York hasn't provided clear guidance on this yet. Some relief programs have accepted returns filed after the original deadline specifically for the purpose of determining benefit eligibility, while others have stuck strictly to returns that were filed by the original due date. The broader issue here is that this entire approach to distributing relief money is fundamentally flawed because it excludes the people who often need help the most. When you base eligibility on tax return filing, you're essentially creating a system where you have to already be plugged into the formal financial system to receive benefits. This leaves out undocumented immigrants who might be afraid to file returns, elderly people who have never needed to file because they live on Social Security alone, and individuals experiencing homelessness who might not have the resources or knowledge to file returns even if they earned enough income to require filing. What's particularly frustrating about New York's approach is that other states have found ways to distribute relief payments more inclusively. Some states have used Social Security Administration data to reach seniors, worked with community organizations to identify eligible low-income residents, or created alternative application processes for people who don't file tax returns. New York has the resources and technology to do better, but they've chosen the easiest administrative path rather than the most equitable one. The amounts themselves, while welcome, also raise questions about whether this relief is really adequate to address the inflation crisis that New York families are facing. When you break down $150 to $400 against the reality of New York's cost of living, you're talking about maybe a week or two of groceries for a family, a partial month of utilities, or a small dent in rent costs. While every bit helps, these amounts feel more like a political gesture than a serious attempt to provide meaningful economic relief to families struggling with inflation. Looking at the bigger picture, this program represents both the potential and the limitations of state-level relief efforts. On the positive side, New York recognized that people are struggling and found a way to return some tax revenue to residents rather than just keeping it in state coffers. The fact that they're using excess sales tax revenue is actually somewhat appropriate, since sales taxes are aggressive and hit lower-income families harder than wealthy ones. So returning some of that money does provide a bit of balance. However, the execution reveals the same systemic problems we see in many government benefit programs: complex eligibility requirements, reliance on systems that exclude vulnerable populations, and administrative processes that prioritize efficiency over equity. The result is a program that will undoubtedly help many middle-class New Yorkers who file tax returns and fall within the income limits, but will likely miss many of the people facing the most severe financial hardship from inflation. If you're a New York resident wondering about your eligibility, the most important thing you can do right now is locate your 2023 New York State tax return and verify that it was filed properly. If you filed jointly with a spouse, make sure you know your combined income figure, and if you filed as single, double-check where your income falls within those brackets. If you didn't file a return but think you might have been eligible to do so, this might be the time to consult with a tax professional about your options, keeping in mind that any advice needs to be specific to your individual circumstances and local tax laws. The bottom line is that while New York's inflation relief program is a step in the right direction, it's also a reminder of how much work we still need to do to create truly inclusive and effective economic relief systems that reach everyone who needs help, not just those who are already connected to existing government systems.